Welcome to the 27. Today we'll be discussing my custom setup for the McLaren GTR at Spa 2020 using these racing conditions. So strap in.
So why is it so hard to let you go?
This is my second GT1 setup deep dive, and the reason I chose the Porsche and McLaren to go over first was because in the Porsche's case I felt it had some really severe drivability issues, but otherwise you could tell it was a fast car, and obviously with that, probably a popular car as well. The McLaren, on the other hand, I felt to be relatively drivable out of the box, but it had some issues with Spa in particular, making it feel abnormally slow. That potentially could be ironed out. So if you're interested, refer to my previous default setup analysis for the GT1s from a couple of weeks ago. Let's get into the McLaren. Here, I wanted to talk about two things. First, you never can tell the potential of a car in racing conditions using defaults, or at least I can't, unless the defaults are really good for that track. Even time trial mode leaderboard times aren't necessarily dispositive because a lot of the top drivers use defaults and you can throw the cars around more than you typically would care to in a race. This wears out the tires way too much. So what I can say is the only real way to compare cars in a race is to first do some setup work, fix the car the best you can, and then take it into multiplayer to see how it goes. If you feel that the car is simply outclassed, then that's just the way it is. Because right now, this car that you're looking at is dialed in for Spa, and if you like the McLaren, this is your best shot. So what do we find with the McLaren here at Spa? Well, generally Spa is an interesting track to build a setup for because it has three very important corners that the car absolutely must handle well. Eau Rouge, Pouin, and Stavelot. If your car can't handle all of these, you're not going to have success at Spa. And the McLaren had issues with Pouin and a severe issue with Stavelot. To get the McLaren dialed in, we started out with installation laps to set the brake pressure, bias, and differential. We did this to make the car drivable for further testing. You don't want to be spinning regularly when testing, and since the differential and brake bias can really affect that, you'll have to start the laps over again, and that's really a pain. I also started tinkering with the pressure and cambers at this point too. I found the brake bias to be right on point, but the brake pressure was quite high. I had a lot of wheel slip spikes in the 20, 30, 40% range with the defaults. Reducing the pressures helped keep them at 20 in some spots, but generally well below. The differential I thought was good. Perhaps a wee touch snappy at the chicanes, which isn't unexpected. I locked it a bit because I generally prefer this. However, La Source and the final chicane were still a bit tricky, and that's just because they're just tricky. There's no other way around it. Next, we started evaluating the cornering. So we looked at the weight balance using the springs, ARBs, and also the aero package. The car was generally balanced forward, leading to a more understeering nature. But I hoped that when I fixed the trouble corners, the rest would sort itself out, and generally it did. I knew Eau Rouge was fine, but Pouin and Stavelot had issues, so we started there. I reduced the ARBs 3 clicks in the front. After that, I felt the car was too responsive under initial corner turn-in while trail braking, so I wound up stiffening the front springs. We ended up with it favoring understeer a touch more than normal, so I will explain why in a bit. The aero was the next problem. The car squatted more than any car I've ever seen, even with max rear springs. The front was higher than the rear pretty much at all times except for heavy braking zones. This potentially could explain some of the general understeer in its own right, and with a high-speed track like Spa, you want the top speed sorted. So we increased the rake to the max, which was 80 millimeters in the rear. This made it so that when you're finishing Kemmel straight, the car was pretty much even front to rear. Now, whenever you do this, the car will have drastic drivability changes. The McLaren responded beautifully. Actually, it was too good. And in particular, Pouin and Stavelot, it had a tendency to oversteer. The front end had too much bite, and the back end would wash out. So I moved the longitudinal weight bias rearward as much as possible, but it was really the front downforce. It was way too strong at that point, so we wound up getting rid of all of the front downforce. All the while I was tinkering with the cambers and the pressures. We changed the ducting because we didn't really have temp issues per se. The brakes were getting a bit too cold, actually, even for me. Next, we use the campus section here at Spa to dial in the dampers. Any problems in this section is generally a body roll and pitch issue, going from right to left and then rearward. And if you have an unbalanced car anyway, it's a huge headache. The dampers play a big role in this. I reduced the rebound across all of the wheels because I felt it was too stiff in general, and then I stiffened the front bump to allow for a bit more responsiveness, but not too much bite while cornering there. This is because the car tended to oversteer on throttle at exit. So to help that out, we softened the rear slow bump dampers to slow down the weight transfer, allowing for more forgiving throttle application. But when looking at the telemetry HUD, I noticed something interesting. The right rear tire was wearing out way more than the others. So under this circumstance, although fast, I, I kept a bit of understeer in the build, so the fronts had to work a bit harder, which relieved some of the work the rears were doing. We saved almost 1% of rear tire wear per lap. Finally, the race itself was just a lot of fun. The 1v1 versus the lead car and the back and forth was amazing. The AI is really getting there. However, the AI was quick in most sectors of the track, but Eau Rouge. I had to lift off on the straight leading up to Eau Rouge so I could time my attack. The Kemmel Straight was actually like an arcade game at that point. But we did learn that we could get up to 10 kph more speed down the Kemmel. So with that knowledge, we finished off the gearing by actually increasing the final drive ratio to take advantage of that acceleration. It was basically being wasted all down that Kemmel Straight. So that's it. I hope you enjoy the build. Stay tuned to the 27 as we have a lot to do. I will be coming out with a Mercedes GT1 build soon, and I'm not forgetting the GT3s. So until then, take care.
So why